an infinite light that can change the world. But it's so deep, it can also remain dormant for their whole life. And the only way you can access it is if you really have to work through lots of issues. You really have to fight for yourself. You really have to work through all of your vulnerabilities and traumas and blemishes and blockages. Only by working them through will you discover your true potential, your true essence, and then you'll be able to own your light, and you'll be able to actualize it.
This is the first time I did something like this. Never did it before. I got to sit down with Rabbi YY Jacobson live in front of hundreds of people, and I loved it. I loved every moment of it. Aside for the incredible wisdom that Rabbi YY shared with all of us, it was also this energy. There's something magical about, you know, everything I do with these interviews. I never hear an audience reaction. Yeah, I've gotten feedback before, but to hear people laugh or clap or react or ask their own questions, it was really special. It was really, really special. It was also the first time my wife makes an appearance on a podcast that I do. So get ready for, you know, her part in it at the end. And I was hoping to for this event to be a 10 out of 10, and I think it was 1,000 out of 10. Rabbi YY, you could tell he gave it his all. We covered everything. I'm really excited for this. It's long. I know it's long. You hit play already, so thank you for hitting play and watching this. But I'm telling you, just go through it. There's so many beautiful moments and gems. I like while it's happening, I'm like, that's a soundbite. That's a soundbite. That's a soundbite. This event was very complicated to plan, and I got a lot of help from a lot of people. So thank you to all those people. And I'd love to do more of these events, like once a month, maybe in the White Shul, maybe in the 5 towns. Maybe I'll come to your community. I don't know. But there's something really magical about doing live podcasts. I haven't seen it. I'll take ownership. I want to be that guy, the Jewish guy going around doing live podcasts. So this episode, a special episode, is Le'ilu Nishmas Yehuda ben Shalom Chaim, Shimon David ben Yaakov Shleima, Miriam Sarah bas Yaakov Moshe, Zev Wolf ben Yeshaya, who it was actually his yahrzeit that night, and Yaakov Naftali ben Yonasan Binyamin. This podcast is also powered by E-Events, Cedar Media Studios, and Machshavas Yecheskol's very special thing. I don't know if thing is the right word, podcast show, whatever. You'll hear a little more about them in the middle, but until then, without further ado, my live conversation with the one, the only, Rabbi YY Jacobson. We can all use some inspiration to help us overcome the obstacles we encounter in our lives. Get ready for thrilling conversations about struggle and triumph with those in pursuit of making a positive impact in this world. I'm Yaakov Langer, and you're listening to Inspiration for the Nation. Has anyone ever told you have like a very good speaking voice? Has that ever been told to you?
No.
No? Till tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're off to a weird start. I apologize, everyone. No, but you do have a great voice. And okay, so I want to talk about a few things right before we start.
I once sang a song, and somebody told me not to quit my day job.
Oh.
I was told a few times.
I was actually going to ask you to sing a little, but Sphira, so I held it back on that. I want to thank Hashem for helping me get to this point. I'd like to thank my wife for putting up with all my craziness and giving me all the time to do all this. I'd like to thank my parents, my in-laws. I feel like I'm giving a bar mitzvah pshatel. Like I'm going to talk about tefillin soon. Like, okay, what? Shel Yerosh, Shel Yad. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. No, I think I'll leave the Dvar Torahs up
to you. Thank the caterer, the florist,
getting everyone.
Your parents for raising you.
Yes.
Your brothers and sisters.
I don't have
tolerating
sisters.
you.
I only have brothers.
Okay.
I mean, not yet. Okay, you never know. But, okay, so you're known as Rabbi YY, but I Googled you, which I do often. No, before I interview you, not because I just randomly. Okay, so Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak is your full name. How would you describe yourself growing up? Would you say you're the same type of person?
Well, my name is Yosef Yitzchak, so that's one way of describing myself growing up. YY was a later addition, and the reason is my mother-in-law, God bless her, is a Balas Tshuva. She returned to Judaism at a later point in life, and she's an American, I think 6 generations. And you know, they can't say ches, they have a problem with ches, right? Chala, chana. So my parents, both Russian, was like Yosef Yitzchak. For my mother-in-law, that was like impossible. Yosef Yitzchak. So it became YY. Retroactively, the joke became that when I was born, they asked why. And I'm trying to answer that question. So YY it is. And today, during davening, somebody came over to me and said, I just got a call from Israel, and somebody said that they listened to you and they wanted to know, they call you YY because after some of your speeches, people say, wow. So that was a nice compliment. I grew up in a very fine home and community, no major dramatic upheavals.
Like there was never a stage of you being JJ.
My mother used to call me JJ.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know how you know, but yeah, you were mechaven. You really Googled.
Yeah,
me.
yeah. I was using Bing. I was going deep.
You did the CIA Google.
So at what point would you say that you shifted into this, I guess, personality where a lot of people know you, you're talking a lot, you're speaking a lot? I mean, even just to book you tonight, it wasn't so easy, but Baruch Hashem, you're going around. Was that gradual, or was it like a certain moment that hit?
I don't want to sound like a party pooper, but it was like almost a mistake. And what I mean by that is I didn't plan it or expect it. Growing up, nor did I go to a, what do they call it, a job coach, when you go to somebody to...
I went to one once. They said I should be a florist.
Okay.
I don't have so much faith in them anymore.
So I never went to a guru to tell me what the trajectory of my life would be. It really happened very gradually. I grew up in Brooklyn in New York, and as a yeshiva student, in the last years of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's life, I was on the team of chayzrim, which means oral scribes. But I was learning, for many years I was learning. And then my father of blessed memory, who had a Yiddish newspaper, he asked me to write a column, so I wrote a column there. And then just one week I got an invitation from a community in Chicago to come for Shabbos. And I told the Rebbe, I think you got the wrong number. I don't do this. You know, I was learning. Sometimes I would give a shiur. He says, no, I read you. I want you to come. I'll even pay your ticket. I'm like, okay, you'll pay my ticket, fine. He nudged me, and I came, and I was there for Shabbos, and I guess he shared it with a friend, because next Shabbos I got a second invitation, and then things just really developed organically, or as the Gemara says, chavre islay. So it wasn't really, you know, strategically planned. I'll be here at this year, there, at this point I'll be here, at this point I'll be here, and it just evolved. Really.
Do you think the Rebbe saw something in you that maybe you didn't see?
It's very possible. The Rebbe generally had a skill of identifying incredible potential where others didn't see it and actualizing it in people. So certainly that has had a very deep impact on my life. Listening to the Rebbe, growing up at his feet in his 4 cubits, it left a very profound impact on me. And I think one of the impacts was to know that when you're given an opportunity, you need to seize the moment and embrace it. And when you're given a potential, you are obliged to actualize it. As the Rebbe would often say, every single person's light is indispensable and an essential fabric of all of history. I remember he once said, when somebody doesn't utilize their potential, it's not just they're squandering their potential, so it's a pity. He says it's actually affecting the entire history and the entire cosmos, because every piece is an essential part of the puzzle. So if I'm not showing up to life with my full presence and my full energy and my full creativity and my full potentiality, it's not just myself that I'm affecting, but he said it's part of the essential divine scheme of the entire cosmos that's being affected. So that was a very powerful message that I always grew up with. And, I take it seriously. So when different opportunities came up and showed up, I always understood that it's important for me to work hard and show up to the best I can, and then let God do the rest.
It's a little of a personal question. And don't worry, if you don't want to answer, we could cut it out after. I'm used to saying that. We're in front of everyone now.
And we'll delete it. We'll ask them to delete it from their memory.
Right. So at that point, what were you struggling with personally in your life?
At what point?
At that point where the Rebbe's like kind of telling you like you have this potential and there's something in you and you got to tap into it. And
well, the Rebbe never told it to me personally. I'm saying the Rebbe's presentations, his talks, his fabringen, every Shabbos he would talk. This was a very prevalent theme, but he didn't tell it to me personally. The one thing that once happened that was interesting, again, it was a message maybe somewhat eclipsed. I was a child. Before Bar Mitzvah, I was a young boy, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe would hold a fabringen on Shabbos afternoon. It would begin 1:30, and it could go almost till the end of Shabbos for many hours. He didn't sleep on Shabbos, and he didn't let anybody else sleep on Shabbos. We almost never had cholent. It was a very different type of Shabbos experience.
It sounds like a
completely different. Davening was over, and then you had a little break so you could make Kiddush, maybe run home if you wanted to. Most people didn't even do it because they wanted a good place. And then he would come down 1:30 and fabring throughout the day. So it was a very different type of Shabbos experience. My late father would take me there every Shabbos, and there were like 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 men in the men's section, women in the women's section, and I was 6 years old. The Rebbe would speak for long, and he wouldn't tell jokes and stories. It was long talks and sichos and long in-depth shiurim, and all in Yiddish, very complex. So what is a 6 or 7-year-old child supposed to do? I was there. I was very jealous of my friends who would play on Eastern Parkway. They would kill each other like good Brooklyn Jewish boys. What do you do Shabbos afternoon? You run around, beat up each other. Classic New York style. Not Five Towns. We're talking about Brooklyn. Brooklyn was less, more brute.
I'm
more
from Brooklyn,
tough.
so yeah, sure, we're so much more tough.
Tough boys. Yeah. But I was there, and I have to confess that I wasn't really listening. I would daydream. There were a lot of beams. I would count the beams. And when I finished counting the beams, the person who put in the tiles in 770 didn't know what he was doing. So nothing was symmetrical. So I became an expert on all the crevices and all the dissonance. I didn't know about cognitive dissonance yet, but the dissonance between the tiles. Anyway, then, I don't know if I should confess all of my childhood sins.
I don't want to get you canceled. I don't want to...
Yeah. As long as my wife doesn't cancel me, I'll be fine.
Okay, good. Is she here now, or no?
She's home.
Okay.
With my children.
Okay, that makes sense.
So what happened was, I was really bored. So I took the tzitzis of one man, and I tied it. I know Shabbos, you're not supposed to do it. I tied it to the tzitzis of another guy. And I would wait till the fabringen was over, and they would try to part ways. The zenith of my sadistic career happened one Shabbos when I tied 4 men's tzitzis together. And they lived on the 4 corners of Crown Heights, south and west and north and south, and east and west and north and south. And I couldn't wait till the end of the fabringen when a third world war would break out between these 4 people trying to go home. And it did. And one day I was in the middle of my tzitzis campaign, just trying to entertain myself. And suddenly I stood right parallel to the Rebbe. The Rebbe was sitting there. I was like standing here, a little kid. And suddenly I see, the Rebbe was in the middle of talking. I see him lifting up his hand and pointing his finger right at me. I still remember his finger was shaking a little bit, and he was pointing like this. And I'm like, OMG. This was very rare, because the Rebbe wouldn't address individuals at a fabringen. There were thousands of people. He would talk to the crowd. They would sing, say l'chaim in between the talks. It was mostly talking, sichos, my marim, long sichos on my mar. And he's literally pointing at me. And I'm like, wow, maybe after all these years of daydreaming, and then there was no ADD, there was no diagnosis, right? It was just, those days, everybody got the same diagnosis. It was called too fresh, too patch for everybody. But after years of daydreaming and tying tzitzis, I thought maybe the Rebbe got upset. And he's going to tell me, You know, what are you standing here and tying people's tzitzis together? You know, one of the 39 malachas is kosher. You're not allowed to make knots on Shabbos. You're doing this, and you're doing this for a long time. I just didn't know what's going to happen next. And, you know, if Chabad throws you out, where do you go? You know, if you're not Jewish enough for Lubavitch, where do you go? To Satmar? Like, where do you go? To Torah Karta? You know, what's the next destination? But instead of throwing me out, he broke out in a big smile, and he asked me a question. I'll never forget it, in Yiddish. And his question was these words: Von wannend weißt du, as da Welt? How do you know that the universe exists? You know, a question out of the blue, if there was ever a question.
How old were you at that time?
9, 10.
Wow, that's a big
How do you know the universe exists? 5,000 men were now looking at me. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe is waiting for an answer. And I was thinking, I don't know how the universe exists. I never thought about it. What is this, an epistemology, philosophy, theology class in Harvard? How I know the universe exists? And besides, I was thinking to myself, you know, Lubavitcher Rebbe, I didn't disturb you when you were talking. Why are you disturbing me? You know, live and let live. We live in America. Let me go on with my tzitzis campaign, and you go on with your brilliant talks. And I remember my face changing colors. I really didn't know what to say. It was so uncomfortable. So I just was quiet. And the Rebbe waited for maybe 10 or 15 seconds. To me, it seemed like eternity. All the eyes were focusing on me. And the Lubavitcher broke out in a big smile, and he decided to answer the question for me, as though I answered it. And he said, so the child answers, how do I know the universe exists? Because the opening verse of the whole Torah is, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'saaretz. Because the Torah says that Hashem created heaven and earth. So if the Torah says it, it must exist. And then he went on to the talk. But next week, I was afraid he's going to ask me another question. I wanted to be prepared. So I started to listen. And as I was listening, it really enthralled me. And I became pretty addicted. An addiction to which I hope I won't recover from till my last breath.
Amen.
So first of all, it was an incredible pedagogical education. The Rebbe asked me a question, how I know the universe existed. And next week, I wasn't tying tzitzis anymore. I was listening. That was number one. Number two, when I got older, I went back to the transcript of the talk, because there were writers who wrote down everything. Almost every word was written. And I saw that the Rebbe was describing that the innocence of children is such that they don't know about the world from the New York Times or from outside sources. They know about the universe from Torah. So their view on the world is very ideal, it's very pristine, it's very pure, it's very idealistic. That was his point then in a long talk. It was a Rashi that he was discussing by Yaakov. And later when I grew up, I thought to myself, maybe this was some form of a calling or a mission statement or an empowerment. That, you know, when you travel the world, you'll travel the world one day, and remember that your mission is to remind everybody to learn about the world from Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'saaretz, to really be able to see the world and ourselves from a divine perspective, from the divine vantage point.
Wow, that is a good answer to the. I don't remember what I asked. That's great.
I also don't remember. I was daydreaming.
I'm going to pay attention.
So I learned then how to listen. I started to learn how to listen. Because to be able to repeat and transcribe the Rebbe's hour-long talks, you're talking about talks that went not for a half an hour. It wasn't a rabbi sermon that has a joke in the beginning. I don't know about the White Shul. Is Rabbi Feiner here?
He does a joke in the beginning, yeah.
But there's always a joke. You know, in the rabbinical school, they teach you a joke in the beginning, right? In the middle, you need a joke. At least one or two stories. Yeah, your glasses got to go off. Your glasses got to go on. Hands got to go up, hands got to go down, some drama, some sadness, some joy. So, okay, and even then, if the rabbi speaks for more than 18 minutes, there's somebody on the board who's, you know, the kiddush is waiting. But the Rebbe's Farbrengens were not following that trajectory. So you really had to listen. You had to learn how to really suspend everything and just become an open vessel.
That's amazing. You're, I guess, a very interesting person because you have this rich background in the Chabad world, but also now you're totally, I mean, I don't know how many Chabad people are here, but like you're very in the Litvish world. You're out there in the non-religious world. You're seeing a lot. So my first question is, what could the non-Chabad world learn from Chabad, and vice versa? What could the Chabad world learn, let's say, from the Litvish world?
Chabad world could learn from the Litvish world predictability.
What does that mean?
In a Litvish shul, everything is predictable. You know when you're coming in, you know when you're coming out, you know what to expect.
No, but Chabad, you know, it's always going to start a little late, you know?
On one level, there's more. The Litvish world could learn from the Chabad world the lack of predictability.
In what way that it could be a good thing? Just like more chilled out?
Not chilled out. I think we all have to learn how to synthesize structure with transcending structure.
Could you break that down for like a 4th grade level?
No, but I'll try.
Thank you.
Predictability means, you know, things are very predictable.
Yeah, that 4th grade level, we got that.
That you got?
Yeah, but that we got.
The lack of predictability, you know, when somebody said, now we're going to engage in spontaneous dancing. The lack of predictability means is the ability to really have that unique potential to live in the now, to embrace the moment with full passion, with full vitality, with full pliability and flexibility. And I would say, you know, both elements are so important in life. The only thing is to be really a little more honest about the question. I feel that it's really very superficial today in today's world to speak about communities in generalized ways.
You don't like labels?
Not only I don't like labels, labels are really a very fake and superficial, easy, but inauthentic way of describing the Jewish people or describing reality. It's nice when we could fit it in. You're this community, you're that community, what do you learn from here? But from my intimate encounters and conversations with countless people from all types of communities, both in the Orthodox world and the non-Orthodox world, I've come to discover how generalizations are really just an unfair, if comfortable way of describing things. Because you know, every person, you really have to know who they are and what they're dealing with. And the fact that they happen to have grown up in this community obviously has an impact, but it's really insignificant relative to tuning in to the person's soul and the person's challenges and the person's circumstances. And then you see that people are really, really individuals. And when you go to a deeper space, especially among the Jewish people, the external labels are much less significant than we usually like to attribute them. Or in the words of the Baal Tanya, his inimitable words in Tanya, V'nefesh Hashenis b'Yisrael hi chelik Eloikam imal mamash. The inner consciousness of the Jew is a piece of God. So if I can really identify that, the word Lubavitch, Litvish, modern Orthodox, Yeshivish, almost Yeshivish, facing right, facing left, yes, it's part of a cultural upbringing and certain, this one has this food at the Kiddush, this one has this food at Kiddush, this one has this minhag, that minhag, this one sings l'chadaydi, this niggin or that niggin, maybe there's some differences of opinion, but it ultimately melts away in the presence of the true infinite depth of the human soul and the human brain. So that's really where I try to live. At least I try to live in that environment more.
I think with that idea, like this concept of achdus just makes so much more sense. It's so much easier because it doesn't make a difference if that person's different or that's great. That's what it's about.
And it's real. It's authentic. It's not just a nice cliche, you know. This is the era of cross-pollination. This is the era of oneness. It's the era of achdus. There's a beautiful Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes says that when Yaakov left his home and goes to Haran, where ultimately he would marry Rachel and Leah and Rachel and build the 12 Shvatim. So the first story is that he takes from the stones, right? He puts his head down on the stones. And then later it says, the stones. So Rashi famously says that there were, the Medrash says that there were 12 stones, and they got into a fight, who gets the tzaddik's head. So what did Hashem do? We all know the story, right?
Combined.
You remember fourth grade?
Yeah.
Fourth grade, you remember?
I'm still there.
Yeah.
You combined it.
Hashem put all the stones together, became one stone, it was one Evan. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe once asked, 1 second, let's say you have a mattress, right? But your head can only be in one place in the mattress, so the mattress should still be in a fight. Not every part of the stone is getting the head. And he answered, I'll say in Yiddish, he says, as mis ein Sach mit der zweiten, art nicht wo der Kopf is. When you're one with the other, you don't mind where the head is. Right? A husband and a wife don't fight. Who gets credit for the beautiful children? I get credit. If it's a good relationship, we're one unit. This is our family. We all get credit. Your success is my success is your success. Sfas Emes says that when Yaakov was going to build the Jewish people, and there would be 12 tribes with different personalities, different flavors, right? Different mahalchim, as we would say in the yeshivish slang, different journeys, different pathways. There were 12 stones fighting with each other. Who has the head? Who has the head? Who's the real version? Who's the real Jew, right? There's Miu Yehudi in Israel, Miu Yehudi, and then there's Miu Yehudi in the frum world. Like, who's the real Jew? And who's like, who's the copy and who's the original? That was the fight. And the Rebbeinu Shalom told Yaakov, no, it's not going to work this way. If you want to build Klal Yisrael and you want them to endure, and you want to bring them from Avram Avinu to Mashiach, the stones are going to have to become one. And it doesn't mean there's no 12 stones, but it means that there's a true inner spiritual organic oneness. And if you're not going to live in that space, Yaakov, this nation won't be able to survive.
Wow. So I want to take that idea and make it like practical. So what if there is, people and they're just not seeing eye to eye, and unfortunately that's just what happens in Klal Yisrael, what happens in the world. People, I don't know if they like fighting, but that's just the reality of what happens.
Yeah. You mind if I make a bracha?
No, not at all. Amen.
That's also how I know the world exists. Everything came into existence through his word, so must be it exists. Listen, the challenge is obvious, but the challenge doesn't only exist in Klal Yisrael. The challenge exists in every single family. Let's take marriage as a classic example. Do a husband and a wife have to see everything eye to eye? Are there no disagreements in a healthy marriage?
They'd be the same person if that was the case.
Do you know of a Jewish marriage where there are no disagreements? Anybody? You want to raise your hand?
Not mine, but everyone else, besides mine.
Okay. Right, in our cases, our wives are always right, and that's why we're out of the house as often as possible, right? Yeah, but not everybody is that way, right? The point of a relationship is not that we have to agree and see eye to eye about everything. It's that we have to be able to trust each other. Loyalty, trust is the key in a good marriage. I want to know that you have my back 1,000%. You want to know that I have your back 1,000%. That when we disagree, it's not coming from hatred or negativity or quid pro quo or vengeance, or I'm going to show you who's right, or I'm going to win the argument. I always tell couples when they come, I say, they're arguing about something, I say, you know what? The conclusion is almost irrelevant. I'll tell you the most important thing is whoever wins the argument, whatever you decide, make sure the relationship is intact. Where are you going for Pesach? Where are you sending the kids to school? Which shul you're not stepping foot into? Whatever it is, you're buying a house here, you're buying out, important questions. Whatever you decide, just make sure that the relationship post the conversation is intact, because that's more important than the decision. So, of course, there are disagreements. You spoke about Daf Yomi that you don't learn, right?
Oh, I learn. I do Kinyan
Masechta. Amud Yomi.
Yeah, Kinyan Chazara.
Kinyan Masechta, okay.
Yeah.
So, I thought it's maybe the shul you don't
My Rabbi Erlansky's here somewhere. Yeah, we do it. Yeah, I learn.
Right.
I don't do Daf Yomi.
I once heard from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz of blessed memory. He said, Jews have a streak of insanity. And he said one of the things that kept Jews more or less sane is Gemara. Because what's Gemara? Every page of Gemara almost is filled with arguments. Nobody can see eye to eye. Can't Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel once in a while just agree? Rav and Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, Ravina and Rav Yosef, Reb Meir, Reb Shimon, Reb Yossi, Reb Yehuda, they're always arguing. Always. The whole culture of Talmud, the whole Torah Shabbat Peh is based on arguments. What does that teach us? And the Gemara says in Eruvin, Yud Gimel, and Yud Gimel is Begematria Echad. So it's on that daf, and it's also Begematria Ahava. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chayim. But they're opposite views, and yet they're both the words of the living God. Because truth is manifested through many different midas and many different personalities and many different flavors, but it's still divrei Elokim Chayim. So it's really the ability to be able to see the soul, to see the wisdom, to see the depth in the other person, to create space for their perspective, and never to lose the loyalty and the trust and the dedication to each other. And then everything changes, It says in Pirkei Avos, Kol machloikas shi l'shem shamayim soifel iskayim, right? Every machloikas for the sake of heaven is going to endure. It's a strange statement. You would think that if it's a machloikas l'shem shamayim, it should ultimately dissipate. And somebody once said something very profound. Dr. Gottman, he's the guru on marriage. So he did 40 years of research, maybe with 30 or 40,000 couples. And he reached a very interesting conclusion. He said they used to think that good marriages are marriages where the couples don't argue. And miserable marriages, they're always arguing. He said, now we realize that 70%, or to be exact, 69% of arguments between couples in a great marriage that they have in the beginning of the marriage, they'll also have when he's 99 and she's 97 and they're on a hammock in Palm Beach in Florida, he's reading the Wall Street Journal, or she's listening to your podcast, or watching a YY clip. The same argument that they had at Sheva Brachas 75 years earlier, 70% of those arguments they're still having. Where do we go for Pesach? Milchiks, Fleishiks, Venetian blinds down or up? Do we keep the light open? Do we keep the light closed? Shut the light. Is it too cold? Is it too hot? The only argument they don't have at that stage is if we're going to her mother for Yom Kippur. Because she's already on the Olam HaEmes. Right. Remember, he's 99 and she's 97. But most of the other, 70% of the arguments are there. And then I realized, Machloikas shi l'shem shamayim. In a bad marriage, you know how arguments end? Either I convince you, you convince me, or I stonewall you, I run away. In a good marriage, you know how arguments end? They end with the recognition that we can really see things different ways. And they continue. Because the trust is the key. The trust, the loyalty. I'm here for you, you're here for me. And yes, there's different perspectives. Elu ve'elu. We're fine with that. That does not undermine the Jewish people. Every person is different. There's different ways, there's different malach. Of course, there's a system of halacha through which we reach practical conclusions, which a couple also has to have, which we also has to have. And that itself is discussed in Shulchan Aruch. That does not undermine us. There's a beautiful, again, I mentioned Sfas Emes, a beautiful Sfas Emes. He says, the first two stories about Moshe Rabbeinu, in Parashat Shmos, what's the first story? He goes out and he sees an Egyptian beating a Jew to death. What does he do?
Kills him.
He kills him. Done. The Jew is saved. He goes out on the second day. And what does he see? One Jew is about to beat another Jew. And he says, Lama sakariyach, why do you do this to your friend? And the man says, oh, you're going to kill me like you killed him. And Moshe realizes that the story is known. And of course, they inform Paroi, and he has to run for his life. Sfas Emes says that Golus has two casualties. One is anti-Semitism. Non-Jews that hate Jews, who hate Jews. There's another casualty. Jews who hate Jews. For the first crisis, Moshe found a solution. He killed the murderer. For the second one, he didn't find a solution. He had to run away. Because the second one, in a way, is more lethal because it's the toxicity, it's the poison that comes from within. And he says that second casualty of Gullus, in a way, is more dangerous than the first because there's no identifiable enemy. I become my own worst enemy. We say Pesach v'hisha amda, right? So the expression there is Shaloi echad bilvad amad aleinu l'chalaseinu. So there's a beautiful Hasidic interpretation. Shaloi echad bilvad amad aleinu l'chalaseinu. You know the one thing that threatens us? Loi echad, that we're not one. Loi echad bilvad, that itself, we are not one. That is amad aleinu l'chalaseinu. And that's what we in today's generation, I feel, this is, you see everywhere. And I'll be honest with you, when I was growing up, it was almost a popular thing to defame a particular community. If I was a rabbi and I got up in a shul and I spoke about a particular community, fire and brimstone, I would become popular. Today, there's an expression, it's not a schayra hamaleches. Nobody wants it. If somebody gets up in the White Shul, or somebody gets up in any shul, almost any demographic in the whole Orthodox world, and starts talking about a particular community, just slandering them, defaming them, trying to destroy them verbally, people will revolt in disgust. And that's a tremendous, tremendous evolution. It's a tremendous development. Everyone is realizing that cross-pollination is essential to the food chain. It's essential to the ecosystem. And it's essential to the Jewish ecosystem. Cross-pollination is not a curse. It's a blessing.
So there's this idea that there's a lot of good going on in the world now. Maybe, not maybe, but hopefully Mashiach's going to come very soon. There's a lot of good. But there's also this idea that, I've heard people express that there's not enough Yiras Shamayim going on now. There's a lot of these talks about, being positive and things are good, but there's also this idea of like, are we going to, Chas v'shalom, water down Yiddishkeit? Like, would Avram Avinu look at us and be happy?
The 8th day speaks about it. Avraham, I told you I'm not going to sing. You know that one, right?
Yeah.
Are we the children you have dreamed of? Right?
Yes.
Are we the shining star you saw at night? So let's ask the Marcuses. What do they say?
I interviewed them. They weren't so easy to interview. They're great, but I think you'd give it a little bit better answer.
Okay.
They're great. Don't get me wrong.
Well, you ask about Avram Avinu. I mean, you chose the right name. I mean, you really fed me with an answer.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it was a bad choice because.
No, I want to hear the answer. I'm not like trying to grill you here.
Avram was the paradigm, the embodiment, the archetype of love and affection. Look at the difference between Noach and Avram. Okay, they both lived in a corrupt world. Noach, Malach Haaretz Chamas, or Hamas. And God tells him to build an ark because he's going to destroy the world for 120 years. Why 120 years? So what does Rashi say? 4th grade.
So everyone sees him building it.
So everybody sees him building 120 years, right?
That's a long time.
And they'll do tshuva, hopefully, right? So he builds it 120 years. It becomes a tourist attraction. Everybody wants to know, what is this old man doing? 500 years old, he's an old man, and he says there's going to be a flood, God will destroy you, you will all drown unless you do tshuva. Now I want to ask you a question. After 120 years, how many bali tshuva did Noach make?
0.
Your grandmother would say bupkas. Efes, yeah? 0. 120 years, he's telling the world about the Bible. Not one. What did Avram Avinu do? Avram Avinu vayita eshel bebe'er sheva. He opened up his home. He gave people to eat and drink. He embraced them with love. 3 Bedouins who come, he gave them a lavish meal. He served them. He spoke to them. He fabrenged with them. He sang with them. He celebrated with them. And what happened? The Meiri writes in the introduction to Pirkei Avos that more than half of humanity was transformed by Avram Avinu. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, the 1st chapter, Avram would go from city to city in the ancient world and he would hold huge press conferences, talk to the masses and introduce them to the idea that they were conceived in love, that there's a purpose to their existence, that they're all integrated and they're responsible to each other. And Vayita Eshel Be'er Sheva Yikrasham B'Shem Hashem Keilolam. Now you ask, what about Yiras Shamayim? What about fear of heaven? So the truth is as follows, that, and that's the night suddenly became the night of the Sfas Emes, but I'll tell you about Sfas Emes and Reb Zusha of Anipoli. It says in Parshas Yisro, right after Matan Torah, it says, Vayara om vayanu vayamdu meirachak. The Jews trembled and they stood from far. And they were frightened. So Moshe tells them, Al tiro. Chevre, don't be afraid. Because the reason Hashem appeared is, Ba'avur tia yirasai al pneichem. So that his fear should be on your face. So the Sfas Emes says, come on. First you tell them, don't be scared. Al tiro. In the same pasuk, you contradict yourself. Talk about a contradiction. Imagine you tell somebody, don't be scared, but you know why God is here? So that you should be scared. In the same pasuk, and you can look it up at the end of Yisro. So he says there's two types of fear. There's a fear that traumatizes you. There's a fear that gets planted in your heart and you tell yourself, I don't want a relationship with you. I'm afraid. I want to go as far as possible. That's what happened. Vayamdu meirachak. They were terrified. They had what you may call God trauma. It's too overwhelming. It's so uncomfortable. Moshe said, Al tiro. If that fear is making you feel distant, if you're feeling dread, if you're feeling negative energy towards the Rebbeinu Shalom, oy, 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 Al tiro. Das ist nicht good. That's not a good type of fear. That creates anxiety and stress. How many Jews do I know? I get hundreds of emails a week, and many of them I can define by one word. It's called DT, divine trauma. People that their experience, their visceral perception of Hashem is so negative. It's so traumatizing. There's a therapist in Yerushalayim who told me he opened now a group. I thought it was funny, and then he said, no, it's real. And I met some of the guys. It's called SA, Shul Anonymous. Imagine Shul Anonymous. People who are traumatized by Shul because of things that happen. I'm not going to get graphic, but things that happen, they can't step into Shul. So he's open, but they want to daven. They can't go into a Shul. So Moshe says, Al tiro, you have to work on this type of fear. There's another type of fear. Yirasei al pneichem is a fear of ruining such a beautiful relationship. That's good fear. That's healthy fear. That's beautiful fear. Yiras Shamayim is not, I'm afraid of you because you traumatize me, because I hate you, because I think you're out to get me. That's not good fear. And that's the fear that our generation is allergic to. There's another type of Yiras Shamayim. When you have an amazing marriage, you're afraid to destroy it. Not because you're afraid of your wife or your husband, because it's too good to be true. When somebody loves you like crazy, it's scary. You know, if nobody loves you, in a way life is easier, right? When somebody really loves you, it's vulnerable. Everybody knows what I'm talking about?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Because Ashkenazim have a hard time with this. No, I'm serious. Right. Ashkenazim have a hard time with this. The vulnerability of really being loved. Really. I don't mean, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, here's cake. You know, let's face it, a lot of our grandparents who went through so much, Stalin, Hitler, they couldn't love freely after. Not that they didn't love, but they couldn't express emotions so much. It was too dangerous. They saw too much pain. They had to shut down a lot. I had a grandmother, a tzaddikus, right? I came to her house often. She couldn't say I love you, but she would give me food ad infinitum. And it was all love. She would fill up a plate. This was before YY. Yosef Yitzchak, eat. I ate. I finished. I had to eat another plate. And then a third plate. And then I had to take food going out. I went out of the house. I couldn't breathe. But it was all love. They starved. So the way of showing love was you feed them. An incredible generation. So many of us don't know the language of love. Ahavas oilam ahavtanu, or ahavarabba. What do they say here in the White Shul?
We do both. We have two minyanim.
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Zatoisvis, you do both.
Oh,
Brachas Yud Beis, yeah, 4th grade. Avarabba, oh, that's Toisvis, 6th grade. Yeah. Avarabba, avas oilam. Whatever nusach you say, Avarabba is even more intense. The Ashkenazim get more emotional than the Sfardim, because we say avas oilam. But Avarabba is like infinite, excessive. Can I meditate and viscerally? I don't mean with my mind. I know we can do things with my mind. We're very good. We do gymnastics with our mind constantly. But viscerally with my body, you know, libi of sorry around el kelchai. Can I experience that love? Can I really experience? It's very vulnerable to feel love because it demands complete reciprocity and openness. And if I experience that, it's scary. That's Yiras Shamayim. That's the real Yiras Shamayim. I'll tell you an unbelievable word from Reb Zusha of Anipoli. Reb Zusha was one of the greatest Hasidic masters, the brother of the Noam Elimelech, the Rebbe Reb Zusha. He's buried in Ukraine, in Anipoli. He was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich. And the seer of Lublin, the Chayz of Lublin, quotes him. He says, I heard this from my friend Reb Zusha. And he says something, listen, I don't know if anybody else could say it, but he said it, it's printed. It says at the end of Maseches Soita, the last daf, the last Mishnah, what's going to happen before Mashiach comes? Be'ikvus Mashiach. And one of the simon and one of the signs is Yirei Chet Yimasu. People will become repulsed by those who fear sin. So the world explains that the Mishnah means that before Mashiach, fear of sin will be laughed at. If you have Yirei Shamayim, you'll be scorned. You'll be considered as dregs, as garbage. Nobody's going to be interested in you anymore. That's obviously a negative interpretation. Reb Zusha said the Mishnah means something else. Be'ikvus Mashiach, before Mashiach, Yirei Chet Yimasu. The Jewish world will reject a Judaism that's based prominently or predominantly on fear, because they're going to crave dveikus, love, intimacy. That's what's going to happen. So you see today, Yirei Shamayim is the foundation of Judaism. But what makes it the foundation of Judaism is that it's an expression of ultimate love. And that's the type of Yirei Shamayim that today everybody is ready to absorb. Everybody's ready to absorb us. If you could show me how I can have an amazing relationship with my spouse and with my God to the point that I'm afraid to ruin it because it's too good, it's too delicious, who doesn't cherish such a thing?
That's amazing. We'll be right back to this episode. Get ready for the next part. But first, I need to tell you about my friends at Cedar Media Studios. I'm going to read a little about them and then talk a little from my heart. Cedar Media Studios is a creative agency specializing in the creation and successful execution of audio-visual communication strategies for top-level influencers. Their team is here to assist those navigating podcasting, music, and audio production. They help you grow your audience through the latest trends in digital marketing and bring years of experience in the audio and design world to best optimize and market their clients. It is run by the one and the only Rabbi Zevi Kaufman, and I've been podcasting for more than 2 years. Before then, you know me from my first show, but even before then, I was working on a podcast behind the scenes with Rabbi Zevi Kaufman and Menachem Newman. But either way, Rabbi Zevi Kaufman is incredible at what he does. He gets it, whether it's audio, podcasting, marketing. I know personally in all the years of doing shows, I've had many questions, and I turned to Zevi. A few weeks ago, I was at audio problem. We spent like 2 hours on it. Boom, fixed. So the most common question I get is, I'd love to start a podcast. If you want to start a podcast, Cedar Media Studios are your people. They have a massive team of excellent people knowing what they're doing, and they're just so much more than that. They're not just podcasts, they're marketing, digital, everything digital, and getting out there and doing a great job. That's them. And it's any step of your process. It could be you're just starting a business, could be you have a business, you want more people knowing about it. I highly recommend you turn to Cedar Media Studios, and you could send them an email. You could send it to info@cedarmediastudios.com. You could say, hi, I heard you from Yaakov, or Inspiration for the Nation, or Living L'Chaim, and they'll take care of you. They will take care of you. And now, back to the episode with Rabbi YY.
I had a very similar type of conversation with Rabbi Kalish about today's generation and just being vulnerable. What practical advice would you say? Let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, I'm sure everyone struggles with this in some way, but like, I'm too closed. I hear that and I want that, but how do I get out of I'm too scared to become vulnerable. Like, what could someone practically do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Or to put it differently, I'm damaged, right? What do I do about it? So this is also a very unique quality of Ikvus Mashiach, of our generation, because there's a really interesting thing happening, and I'll tell you how I'm seeing it. Maybe it's just my own perception, but I think a little bit I have the finger on at least some people's pulse, not everybody's, obviously. In many ways, we live in the most comfortable generation of Jewish history. We live in prosperity, relatively speaking, of course, that our great-grandparents couldn't even dream of. We're blessed in incredible ways. I think it's the first time, right, maybe since Shlomo HaMelech, that we have an incredible combination in Galus, where half of Klal Yisrael is living in Eretz Yisrael, And the other half of Klal Yisrael is living in countries that allow them to live freely as Jews. It's an incredible moment in history in Golus as we await the Geula. Our children have opportunity in terms of shelter, security, comfort, again, relatively speaking, that my father grew up in Stalinist Russia. He had his father arrested Friday night during Kiddush, 1938, during Stalin's purges. My father was 4 years old, and he watched his father being taken away by the KGB. Friday night in the middle of Kiddush in a place called Mamontovka near Moscow. He was 4 years old, and it affected my father's entire life. We didn't have that growing up. For many of us, the crisis was, where are the car keys? Now, of course, not to underestimate people's grief and people's loss and people's tragedies. God forbid to underestimate any of it. But generally speaking, the blessings of our generation are incredible. And yet, what has emerged in the last few years is an explosion of anxiety. And people ask me all the time, Rabbi YY, where's this anxiety coming from? Mothers tell me, why is my 16-year-old girl anxious? Why? Because she was in a hotel for Pesach? Because B'dikas Chametz took 7 minutes? Right? Because she didn't have to squeeze. Do you remember the squeezing of the oranges? Pesach? 2 months before, I was on the floor scrubbing. We went to hotel for Pesach. What exactly is she complaining about? That's what they want to know. What is my boy missing? What was so miserable about his childhood? What? Do you know what I got from my mother? Do you know what? Can I tell you about my father's anger issues? Your father is a saint, Legabe, my father. Imagine a Jewish woman saying that about her husband. Not pashut. So people are wondering what's happening, and yet we see this as a fact, that there's a lot of trauma emerging. And I feel part of it is that the Ribbono Shel Olam wants our generation to bring healing, not only to ourselves, but retroactively to all of the previous generations, because we know today with epigenetics that we carry trauma in our genes. You can bequeath your trauma to your children, your grandchildren, through your genes, which is a gewaldige scientific chiddush. It was produced by a Jewish professor in Mount Sinai Hospital just a few years ago. That means we carry the trauma of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years. We also carry in our genes the resilience, the faith, the wisdom, the Mesiras Nefesh, the Amunah, the Avos Hashem, the Avos Ater. We carry everything. And I think really a lot of children are simply experiencing things they got from previous generations, and it's an opportunity to heal. That's why it's coming out, because before Mashiach comes, we need pure dveikus, pure intimacy, and there's no intimacy if half of my brain is offline because of trauma. There's no intimacy. There's no intimacy when I'm defined by fear. There's no intimacy when I'm overwhelmed by insecurity, when I'm overwhelmed by the need to freeze, to run. What are they called? Fight or flight. There's no intimacy. Intimacy happens when I could be fully present and vulnerable with every part of my being, my soul, my brain, my mind, my body, my heart. So I say to all of us, the only way we're going to be able to heal is when we all become vulnerable together. And the most important thing you need is courage. You need courage. There is so much opportunity today for help. There are so many models of therapy. There are so many opportunities of healing. There are so many different methods of healing. The most important thing is have the courage. You deserve to live a better life. You deserve to live a full life. Many people live lives of quiet desperation. Many people's marriages, relationships, and lives are just monotonous and devoid of real depth. But you deserve much more, and you're capable of much more. So even if you suffered, and even if there's many blockages, and even if you're scarred, and even if you're afraid, I would encourage everybody who's listening, have the courage to open up, to start to search. If one thing doesn't work, go to the next. Be determined, be aggressive, be real, be vulnerable, be authentic, and you will find healing, because the Ribbono Shel Olam put into our generation there's a lot of anxiety, but there's equal zela umazeh. There's extraordinary opportunity for growth and healing. And let me tell you, anyone who's going through this process, I believe it's for one reason only, because you're destined for leadership, because the only people today who can really affect our lives are people who we feel that they understand us. If somebody can look into my eyes and empathize with my pain, I can trust them. Think about people who really changed your life, and you will see it's not cerebral geniuses who are living in ivory towers. It's people who have been through the ringer, who can really empathize. If you're going through something, it's because you have an unbelievable light to cast on the world. And when you work that through, you will become a source of incredible inspiration and empowerment for a whole generation.
Wow, that's a very good answer.
Thank you. Tell my mother-in-law.
First of all, you could have more order. So when you're saying...
one of the profoundest letters I once saw in 1986, this is before it was popular. There was a boy struggling with homosexuality. This is 1986, so it's not 2022, you know.
Right.
This was not discussed. It's a religious boy, a frum Jewish boy. And he penned a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory about his dilemma. And even though the Rebbe was then much older, this is 86, the Rebbe was already, this is 1986, so the Rebbe was in his high 80s, and he wasn't writing so many letters, but he wrote this boy a beautiful letter, almost I think a 3-page letter, in English. And I happened to see it years later. And it's fascinating that in the letter he discusses neuroplasticity, which in 1986, you know, it was just beginning. I don't even know, he explained how neuroplasticity works and how if they allow the proper research, neuroplasticity will prove to be very helpful. By the way, it never turned out that way because politics dominates this field. Right. Unlike strokes or other issues here, you know, politics completely eclipses the science. Okay, but that's a separate parsha. But there's one paragraph there that I would say touched me in such a deep way, and it taught me so much about how to speak to people. I never saw his letter, but I saw the response. He says, "You ask me, why did God do this to you? Why do you have to go through this struggle?" So the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, "I don't know. You know, I don't know the mysteries of life and why different people go through different things." But he says, I want to bring out one point that's brought in Jewish books and Sfarim, and it may apply to you. And if it does apply to you, great. If not, not. And the point he makes is as follows. He says, sometimes a person possesses inside his soul or her soul an infinite light that can change the world. But it's so deep, it can also remain dormant for their whole life. And the only way you can access it is if you really have to work through lots of issues. You really have to fight for yourself. You really have to work through all of your vulnerabilities and traumas and blemishes and blockages. Only by working them through will you discover your true potential, your true essence, and then you'll be able to own your light and you'll be able to actualize it. So he says sometimes we're given struggles so that we should be able to discover who we really, really are, because when we discover that, then all of history will be elevated. As I was reading it, I thought to myself, wow, you know, if a boy would come to me or a girl would come to me and they're struggling, you know, very often we fall into one of two groups. Maybe the more liberal perspective, the more conservative perspective. The more conservative perspective is, this is the way it is, this is the truth, you know, don't deviate, follow the truth, and that's it. And the other approach is, you know, empathy and more empathy, and within each group itself, there's so many different approaches. But the approach would be, yeah, you know, to feel the pain and to identify, and I'm talking about within the frum world, and to empathize even more, and to be sensitive, and to be mushy, and to be soft, and to be loving. But I never thought of this third approach. And the third approach that the Rebbe was sharing with this child is, you know, I don't see you as a tragedy. I don't see you as a Nebuch case. I don't see you as this victim of a terrible tragedy. And now I have to say, you know, either, you know, man up, literally, pun intended, or I'm so sorry and I'm with you. And there's a truth in each. But what he was telling this boy is, I'm not looking at your life as this horrible, tragic, negative story. When I see you and I see your struggle, what I really see is you have incredible, incredible light. And the only way to access that light is if you really work through all of your insecurities. So I was looking at your problem or your challenge really as a gateway. Zeh hashar l'Hashem. This is your path to incredible greatness. The level of empowerment that we can give people that way, when you really sincerely understand struggle that way, is of a whole different magnitude.
Is that approach how you personally are able to deal with? I can't even imagine how many people are coming to you crying about whatever issues they're going through and real issues. Is that how you personally handle all the tsaros going on?
Whew. I need to meditate. I need to ground myself. So the first yesod is always empathy. Empathy, empathy, empathy. If I can't feel you, I won't be able to help. I have to feel you.
It's a lot of feeling, though.
A lot of feeling. But that's the key. Attachment, connection. Empathy. Empathy means really trying to tune in to what the other person is going through, obviously to the best of my ability with the tools I have. But that's the first thing. And the person will feel it. The person will feel it immediately. That must come, number two, with a suspension of judgmentalism. If I have an iota of judgmentalism in me, I'm not fit for this job. You know, I could sit in my cocoon and judge the world. Besides me, of course. I don't judge me. I judge everybody else. If you really want to be here for people, if you want to be an agent of healing, we have to learn how to suspend judgmentalism. Judgmentalism doesn't mean I agree with you. Judgmentalism doesn't mean you didn't make a mistake. Judgmentalism doesn't mean you're a saint. Judgmentalism means that I'm sitting in a throne of judgment with a joystick deciding who you are without tuning in to all of your experiences, your past, present, future. You need a big heart. You need a big, big heart. And to quote the Sfas Emes for the fifth time tonight, don't judge somebody till you reach his space, and you will not reach his space. That's a very real feeling that people will feel right away. You know, people criticize me. I right away feel if you're judging me or you're not judging me. If you're judging me, I'll build defenses. If you're not judging me, I'll be vulnerable. At least I'll try to be vulnerable. After those two foundations, empathy and a lack of judgmentalism, probably lack of judgmentalism comes first, can come step three. And step three is I ask myself, you know, Ma Hashem Elokecha doirish me'imach. What does Hashem want from me at this moment? Or in the words of Mordechai, you know, Mi yodeim la'es kazai sigat l'malchus. Here's a person who wrote an email to me, or met me, or poured out their heart. How can I be here for them? What can I do right now to help this person, to empower this person? And with that perspective, I try to bring and share this dimension, which is always making sure that the person never ever sees themselves as just a victim of circumstances. And that's really this perspective that the Rebbe articulated in this letter. You're not a victim of circumstances. You are an ambassador of Hashem, and the struggle is here not to destroy you. It's here because through this you will fulfill your mission in the world. So instead of looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I'm such a nebuch, I'm a shlamazel, I can't get anything right, which we often do. Instead, you paraphrase the words of Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik, who should have been the ultimate victim, said, you guys didn't sell me. You didn't sell me, sorry. Oh, they didn't sell him? Really? Who sold him? How did he get to Egypt? How did he get to Egypt? He went on a Pesach program to Egypt? How did he get to Egypt? Of course they sold him. You didn't sell me. God sent me. The moment I could say, even if somebody did X, Y, and Z to me, I was not sold. I was sent. This is my mission. This is not a b'di'evet, it's a lechatchila. I was sent into this place because I can bring light into this place. It may be difficult, and I may need to do grief work, but it's a game changer.
I have a few lighter questions that I like to end off with.
Why would you do that?
Oh, you're saying,
joking.
oh, okay, another 2 hours of
Baruch
this.
Hashem, yeah.
But before we get to that, I do want to talk about, this is also, I guess, more of a lighter subject, but I don't think I've ever interviewed anyone who's introduced the President of the United States while they were the president, Donald Trump. What was that experience like for you?
Ooh, America went through a lot since then, so it's like you're really taking me back to another Gilgal. Okay, but sometimes you got to go. Bein begilgal zeh, bein begilgal acher, right?
Yes.
So the truth is, part of the experience was surreal. You know.
Did you make the bracha?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I discussed it. You know, there's an argument among poskim
Right, so like
if you make a bracha on the President of the United States of America. One of the big arguments is he's not a melech. He's not a melech, democratically elected for 4 years. But I spoke to a great posek and he said, I don't understand. If a king becomes a king because he's a tyrant and nobody wants him, then you make a bracha. And if a whole nation or part of the nation, the majority of the nation elects him, so for sure you should make a bracha just because he was elected voluntarily, so people actually want this president. You know, Malchus Beratzon versus the Vilna Gaon says there's Memshala and there's Malucha. Memshala is by coercion and Malucha is Beratzon Kiblu Aleim. But there's different opinions anyway, so I chose one of the views and I made a bracha. There was something very moving I want to share that I saw from behind the stage. You know, I prepared this speech. Initially, they told me you're going to speak for 10 minutes, and then the president was in a rush, and the previous event was cut short. So as I'm about to go up, they say, the president is walking in. So cut your speech to 20 seconds.
Oh my gosh.
So from 10 minutes to 20 seconds. Because the president is here, and his assistant was telling me, you know, he doesn't sit and listen to speeches. He gives speeches, right? He didn't say the other half. So you have, I said, but they asked me 10 minutes. The White House said 10 minutes. 20 seconds. 20 seconds. 20 seconds. So I'm like, okay, I threw away my pages because there goes the 10 minutes. But then I told myself, I said, calm down. You know, and the president walks, you know, when the president walks in with a whole entourage, there's a certain malchus, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily about the personality of the president, whether you like him or you don't like him. It's about, you know, the chair, the position, right, the throne, the president of the United States of America. So as he's walking in, I'm thinking to myself, you know, I'm not speaking for 20 seconds. I want to give the president a message. I'm speaking on behalf of the Jewish people, on behalf of Eretz Yisrael, on behalf of Klal Yisrael, at least a significant part of Eretz Yisrael and Klal Yisrael. And I'm here. I don't care what his assistant told me. I'm not going to speak for 10 minutes. I'm not going to do a 2-hour shiur. So I decided 4 minutes I can get away with, and the president will listen, nish gefährlich. And I got up and I gave my 4 or 5 minute speech. I told a story about the Holocaust. I spoke about Hashem's promise, if you bless, whoever will bless Avram will be blessed, whoever will curse Avram will be cursed. I spoke about supporting Eretz Yisrael, supporting Israel is a historical, divine opportunity that will be remembered forever. A few messages that I thought were really important.
You were saying it as for basically the president, not for everyone watching.
All for the president. I mean, I was happy that my friends, you know, from Williamsburg and Muncie and Lakewood and Borough Park and the 5 towns were listening. But,
right,
you know, we could sit and eat kugel together the next day. But the president was there. There was something else that was so moving. As the president was walking in, he was flanked by 2 people. By 2 people, Avi Berkowitz and his son-in-law, Mr.
Jared Kushner.
Jared. And one of them was wearing a yarmulke. Both of them consider themselves Orthodox Jews. And he walked into a room with 400 yarmulkes. As he was walking in, I was behind stage with him. I shed a tear, and I'll tell you why. Because I had a flashback of another scene. Some of you may know which scene I'm referring to. 400 Jews. You know what I'm talking about? September 1943. I think it was a few days before Yom Kippur. 400 rabbis went to meet Franklin, President Roosevelt, to try to persuade him and plead with him to save whatever could still be saved of European Jewry. And what happened? Roosevelt left the White House through a back door and wouldn't even meet the 400 rabbis. And then I thought to myself, 75 years later, 75 years, just 2 mortgages later, the president is flanked by 2 people. One of them is a yeshiva graduate, and one of them considers himself an Orthodox Jew, a Shema Torah mitzvahs on some level. And he's walking into a room with 400 yarmulkes. And I thought to myself, such a moment in history, you have to remember, you have to be grateful for. Then I got up, I introduced him. He was listening very, very attentively, despite being Donald Trump.
You're a good speaker.
Thank you. His son-in-law says to me, he never got such a good introduction. And then when he got up, he famously said, I like him. So if you like Donald Trump, so then you like the people he likes.
Right.
So you probably also like me. Not everybody likes Donald Trump,
right.
So not everybody liked me on that day, at least. Hopefully today they like me a little more, I don't know. I did get some very, very nasty mail from some of our brothers and sisters the world over. Some of them who felt that I have sold my soul to the devil, and this was an act of pure narcissism on my part, and I sold my mother and my father and my people and my God and everything that Judaism stands for just to get a few moments of, of fame and be on a WhatsApp clip for the next 2 days.
They're calling now to complain.
So I did get that. Not a lot, but I did. And, I responded very respectfully, and I said, I can really understand somebody having a different opinion. I'm not so naive, but I felt it was the real right thing to do, simply for Hakaras HaTov, just for the fact that somebody canceled the Iran deal, where Ahmadinejad and Rouhani were getting $150 billion, which would not be used to build hospitals and universities. Somebody just canceling the Iran deal, $150 billion to the Hitlers of today's generation, somebody who's 70 years after the Holocaust, in the presence of living survivors of Auschwitz, promised that all of Israel would be exterminated in one day, just for canceling the Iran deal, Dayenu. Never mind for moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Never mind for declaring that the Golan Heights is the part of the eternal homeland of the Jewish people. Liberating Reb Shalom Mordechai, etc., etc. You may disagree with him on another 100 issues. You may not like his personality. But I felt that it was important and good for Jews to say thank you and express gratitude and encourage the president to continue in this path. And when I had a few private moments with him, a few private seconds with him as the crowd was applauding, I told him privately, I said that I know how much pressure you're getting, and I know that it's not easy. But I want you to know that as a president of the United States, if you continue to support the Jewish people and to fight for justice and to fight for Israel and to fight against anti-Semitism and terrorism and bloodshed and violence and exploding suicide bombers who just want to destroy innocent people, Jews or Arabs, I said, if you will continue that fight, you should just know that the God of eternity will be here with you and you will be blessed for eternity. And I think that meant a lot for him. I saw how moved he was, and that was basically part of the experience.
It's a very cool experience. And I just wanted to say one word about my friends at Yidflix. Yes, you're watching right now my conversation with Rabbi YY, and there's something important going on. We're talking about the importance of being holy and knowing who we are and what we're doing and why we're doing it. And you want to sometimes get entertained, sometimes learn things in the best environment possible. That's why yidflix.com is the place to go. You have a bunch of Living L'Chaim content there. You have a bunch of Torah content, a bunch of fun content created from creators. It's great. It's the revolution. It's the future. It's kind of the Jewish Netflix, if I dare say myself. It's great. We spend so much time on there in my home. We know it's a safe place to be, and it's great content. And they're always updating, always giving out more gems and jewels and other forms of awesomeness in their content. So go ahead and check out yitflix.com. It is so inexpensive, and try it out for 1 month. I highly think that you'll try it out for years to come. And now back to this episode.
So I want to finish off with a few fun questions. I said that once, and then Moshe Weinberger was like crying giving the answer, so it's not always fun. If there's one person in history that you could sit down with for an hour, who would you sit down with? You already spent some time with Donald Trump, so knock him off the list.
No, I mean, I'm very grateful to what he did for Israel and for the Jewish people, but that wouldn't be my choice. You know, I once asked this question from somebody many years ago, a very, very wise and deep person whom I respected deeply. And I asked him, if there was one person in history you could meet, who would it be? And he looked at me and he said, myself. I would love to meet myself. And I was taken aback. And he said, that's the only real person you're ever going to meet anyway. And if you meet that person, then you'll get to know some other people as well. But if you don't meet that person, then meetings with other people will be futile. And I thought that was a very profound answer, because I think that's really the person we each have to meet. I think I have to meet me, and you have to meet you, because only when we really meet ourselves, and it's not so easy to meet yourself. Sometimes much easier to meet other people.
It's so much easier.
Of course. You take a picture, hang it up in the office. I met him, I met her. To really meet me is really responding to my soul, to my mission in history. So if I can one day meet that person, I would be very blessed.
It's a very beautiful answer. There's 613 mitzvahs, and it could be that this answer shifts for you. As of right now, what is your favorite mitzvah? What's your favorite commandment that you just feel it's yours, it's your baby?
Mm-hmm. I love learning Torah. I get very profound spiritual and intellectual and visceral and emotional stimulation. I also have a special passion for the mitzvah of lo samod al dam reacha. Don't stand by when your friend's blood is being spilled. It's very, very difficult for me to watch when people stand by when injustice is happening in their midst.
I thought you were going to say something else also, so that's why there's the awkward pause. But that's...
What did you think I'm going to say?
I don't know. I thought you were going to explain, like, did something happen once that got you to say, I hate when that happens?
Oh, things are always happening. I'm privy to stories and to episodes and to events where, you know, a mother will come to me, a father will come to me, or somebody else will come to me and describe a particular situation happening in a home or in a school or in a shul or in a community. And I'm like, why don't you call the police? And like, our shidduchim will be ruined. Why don't you speak up? Why don't you... he's a bully. We can't do anything. I understand it. I understand the fear. I understand the compelling reasons to be passive. But it's very painful for me. I think when the pasuk says lo samad al dam reyacha, it means you're not allowed to be passive. Take a stand, and if you have any faith in God, it should be that by protecting the innocent, your children's shidduchim will not be ruined.
So I'm going to end off with one question, but right now, if anyone in the audience, you have a question that you'd like to ask, we'll connect you with the mic. We'll do like 1 or 2 questions from the audience. But right before that, I'm going to ask you, what's the worst advice you've received ever in your life?
Oh, lots.
What's the worst? Or a bunch of the bad ones?
That I should not speak up about child molestation in our communities. That was one of the worst pieces of advice.
Did the moment you heard that, did you know it was the worst advice, or it took some time to realize that?
I knew that it's terrible advice. I myself, I have not experienced, you know, that horrific crime. at least not consciously that I remember, you know. So I didn't know about it. I really didn't know. I didn't know about it. I was serving as a spiritual leader in a shul in Brooklyn years ago, and then just, you know, people started to approach me in their 30s and their 40s. Their marriages were falling apart. This one ended up in prison. This one couldn't have intimacy. This one couldn't function. This one was addicted to this and addicted to that. And I would start talking to the people, and then one story after another story, I saw that it's all traced back to the fact that their sexuality has been terribly, terribly compromised through years of sexual abuse. And I couldn't believe it, because this whole new dark, sinister, demonic world opened up to me. And I'm like, nobody's talking about it. You know, this is 15 years ago, where 20 years ago, you know, we had wall-to-wall carpets, and everything went under the carpet or under the rug. And you know, the many principles, it's just like, you know, tell him not to do it again. You know, tell him not to do it again. Let him move to Eretz Yisrael. Brilliant advice. Right? Let him move to Eretz Yisrael. What happened with Chaim Valder 20 years ago? They knew about him 20 years ago. They knew about him 20 years ago. But nobody stood up. Nobody stood up to him. So how many more young women and men were destroyed because of that silence? So I started to collect data, because I didn't, you know, want to talk about things that are not real. You know, I started to ask and then find out on what's happening, and then I realized that there's literally a systematic cover-up, and not malicious. Simply people. I can't say not. Most people, I think, were not malicious in terms of principals and rabbis and teachers. They just didn't know better. They didn't know about the effects. So I wrote then a letter, and I came out and I started to talk about it and communicate it. And the backlash was very, very intense. I still remember a letter I received from a very prominent person, and he wrote, "You have blood on your hands. You're destroying people single-handedly."
But hold on, but why? I mean, maybe I'm asking from a 2022 perspective, but like, why would they say that?
Because the perpetrator was not proven guilty. Were you believing a little kid who's half drunk, who's immature, who wants to take revenge from the family? You're believing 4 kids against this prominent man who's been in chinuch for 25 years, who's been running a camp? What, you were accusing a father of doing this to his children? What a chutzpah! A guy I'll never forget it. One person wrote to me, he says, "I know why you talk about this, because you are a perpetrator.
Oh, gosh.
And you made a deal with the organizations that if you will speak on their behalf, they'll silence you. They will cover for you." So he writes to me. So I started to laugh, but I was quite upset. And I wrote back to him. I said, "Interesting. If I would hear somebody speak out against abuse, my initial instinct would not be to suspect him in doing it. Why is that your instinctive response? Obviously, you know very well about this sugya. And that's your go-to place. You did it. Of course, Rabbi YY did it." I said, "But you know what? There's tshuva. Do tshuva. Make amends. Confess. Be vulnerable. Pay for your victim's therapy. Go apologize. Become an example of somebody who learned from his mistakes and inspire other people. That's what you should be doing, instead of calling me a perpetrator." I wasn't sure I was right. But I felt it strongly, and I felt it's an opportunity for me to try to help him, actually. I knew I was right when I got back his answer. You want me to tell you what he wrote?
Yeah, I'm dying to know.
He wrote 2 words. I really would not say these words because I feel very uncomfortable, but it's how I knew I was right. He wrote back 2 words. I wrote a very heartfelt email. His 2 words were, "Up yours." That's it. And then I understood that, unfortunately, I was right. So, what should I tell you? There was then a lot of ignorance, and people really thought they can get away with it. And let's face it, there's people still today who get away with it, despite all of the awareness. And I understood then that if we as a community will not stand up to this with absolute conviction and unwavering clarity, then we should take our entire religion and throw it into the dustbin, because that's what we're doing. If we don't see our first and primary obligation as protecting innocent children from people who literally destroy their lives, and sometimes 30 years later, they are suffering terribly. I know them. And we, as rabbis and laymen and wealthy people and influential people and rabbis and Rosh Yeshivas and Rebbes and Mashpiyim and Mashgichim and all of us, Anoshim, Noshim, V'taf, if this is not our primary duty, then what is? Then we have no God, then we have no Torah. It's a mockery. Our religion is a mockery. It was clear. It's still clear to me. And when people were defending this monster from Israel, who not only raped so many people, but then killed himself, right? That was his last act of rape. Like, now you feel bad for me. It's the victims who are murderers. That was the last sociopathic act of a sinister, whatever. You know, it's not so important to describe who this person is now after he's gone. But when there were people who grew up with Torah, who started to defend this person, and there was in a newspaper, Zatzal, Zeichet Tzadik Levracha, right? The day after someone committed suicide because she was raped by him. And then you look and you say, you know, have you no shame? Have you really no God? And then I realized that sometimes religion can become idolatry. Religion can sometimes be an instrument to empower evil and abuse. And that Judaism, we are not allowed to be a part of, because that's paganism.
Well, I'm going to finish off with one question, but...
That was your light question.
Yeah,
no wonder Rabbi Weinberger was crying.
Right, yeah. I should just call them the serious questions at the end.
We'll be right back for perhaps maybe the best moments of the podcast. I don't know. You'll see. It's up for, I think everyone's going to have their own decision about what their favorite part is. There's so many gems here. But I want to tell you, this episode of Inspiration for the Nation is powered by Short Machshava on the Daf, a project of Machshavas Yecheskel. The Short Machshava Shirim aims to give an understanding of the Garata Machshava of every Daf in Shas, following the Daf Yomi schedule, adding a new depth to the Daf, given by the one, the only Rabbi Yecheskel Hartman, a Talmud of Reb Moshe Shapir Zatzal, and a Maggid Shir in Lawrence, New York. Now, if you're doing the Daf, what this is incredible. It gives you the extra insight. And let's say you're not doing the daf. I'm not doing the daf. We all have, and I made sure to make this very clear, I'm still doing Kinyan Masachta. But even if you're not, you want to know what's going on in the daf. That's what the hak, what's going on in the daf right now. You could tap into this share. It's incredible. It's like around 5 minutes. It's a perfect amount of time, and you could really get good insight into what's going on. And more than that, the content is really incredible. I've heard, Rabbi Hartman speak a few times in the White Shul. He's great, and he really points out those ideas that you're like, wait a second, I never really thought about that. So, for example, the 24,000 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva that died because they didn't give each other honor. You're fourth grade, you hear, wait a second, they didn't give each other on, weren't these tzaddikim? What does that exactly mean, and why were they punished? And going into it, there's so many more examples, but if you want to check them out, I highly recommend you could go to machshevasyecheskel.com. You could go to Torah Anytime, All Daf, all the good places to go. Obviously, the links to anything, whether it's whatever he's doing or Cedar Media, or there's going to be a lot of links in the show notes. So go ahead, check that out. Try one. And now back to my conversation with Rabbi YY.
Does anyone have I don't even know where the mics are, but does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask Rabbi YY? There's a mic over there. So I've never done this before, so it wasn't ready if someone's going to ask. Does anyone have a question? This is your chance. Okay, we have someone. Someone's walking up.
Okay, we can't see anything.
Yeah, we can't see. I think it's a Jewish person. I can't really see so well.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
It's Molly Fishbein. I just want to ask, how much do you believe Chassidus and current psychology coincide?
Interesting question. What do I think about the synthesis or the hybrid between the world of Hasidism, the world of Hasidus, and current psychology? Very interesting question. The fact is that generally, the teachings of Hasidus have reframed much of Judaism in very psychological language. Or as Rabbi Yitzchak Varker, I think, once said, that there was a time when Judaism was focused on space. V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'soicham. Yerushalayim, the Beis HaMikdash. Then after the Churban, a big focus of Judaism became on time. Shabbos, Yom Tif, times of davening, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. In Kabbalah it's called from Olam, from space it went to Shana, to time. And he says the Baal Shem Tov introduced the focus on nefesh, on the person. Not finding God in a space or in a time, but in yourself, in your identity. So since so much of Chassidus was about cultivating the inner self and finding the divine vibrations that flow through the human psyche and human spirit, and understanding how to work with your emotions and how to sublimate your emotions, and understanding the relationship between your divine consciousness and your animal consciousness. So very much of it became a focus on Judaism that is internalized emotionally, intellectually, viscerally. For example, I'll give just one classic example. The Tanya Postulates. The Tanya is considered, one of the classic Hasidic works by Rabbi Shneur Zalman, by the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, and he postulates that we don't have one brain. We operate with 4 different brains, or 4 different states of consciousness. And he calls it Nefesh HaChiyunis, Nefesh HaBahamis, Nefesh HaSichlis, Nefesh HaLekis. Literally means the biological brain, the mammalian brain, the rational brain, and the divine soul, the divine brain. So you read it in the Tanya, and you're like, okay, interesting. Suddenly in the 1980s and 90s there's an explosion of neuroscience. For the first time we have CAT scans of the brain, and guess what? Cutting edge psychology is you have to understand parts of your brain. You have the stem. You have your reptilian brain, as it's called. You have your limbic brain, your mammalian brain. You have your prefrontal lobes. And suddenly these terms assumed literally neuroscientific vocabulary. So I think Chassidus generally explores the inner world of emotions from a Torah perspective. So there's a tremendous amount we could learn from it in terms of psychology. On the other hand, the world of psychology often provides us with tools and data and scientific information that can help healing processes. And I think the combination between the two is incredibly powerful. There is always the disclaimer that you have to understand that, like all human sciences, including psychology, they're created by flawed human beings who sometimes have different biases and agendas. So therefore we always have to realize that no system is perfect, and generally science is always a search for truth, but theories that were so cherished a century ago are discarded for new theories. So that's also true in the world of psychology. So we always have to have that humility and sensitivity of not worshiping a particular model that was created by a human being. Sigmund Freud, or his real name was Schleimele Freud, is the father of psychoanalysis, but much of the Freudian model now is not taken so seriously. So it's important also to have that humility and sensitivity. That's a brief answer to a very interesting question.
Does anyone else have a question that they want to ask?
How do we see?
Oh, hi.
Go ahead.
Gita Langer.
My wife.
Your wife?
Yeah, I hope
Yes.
I'm not in trouble.
No.
It's not your wife.
Great job, Yaakov. Great
Okay. So that's Rebbetzin Langer.
Yeah.
I know we speak a lot about child anxiety, and I think it's very important that we speak about it a lot, but how do we raise children with less anxiety when we're living such fast-paced lives, and we have such a lack of attachment with our children these days because, we all have to go to work, we all have to, maintain a certain lifestyle, and, I'm not, I have a babysitter at home, we leave our kids with our babysitters.
I see you're here tonight.
No, I
Wait,
mean,
hold on a
on
second.
day-to-day
Wait, what do we do?
He's safe and sound, don't worry. So yeah, basically my question is we're very, very busy today, and we're living very fast-paced lives to maintain, certain lifestyles, and how do we
Yeah, it's a great question, and how do we help create and raise a generation with less anxiety? And I think, in your question, I think you indicated part of the answer. It's one word that I think we should repeat many times. It's called attachment, attachment, and attachment. I think all of us, our first and foremost responsibility is to be able to create conditions in our homes and families where our children experience the attachment they need and deserve to grow up with all the parts of their brains functioning seamlessly. The reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, the limbic brain, the prefrontal lobes, all of them working together, which only comes when there are the 4 S's, as Dr. Siegel discusses, when they feel seen, soothed, safe, and secure. And I think despite our busy schedules, it's important that the time that we are home, and to make that as much as we can, that time should be, as often as possible, to really provide them with that necessary attachment. And what that means, first and foremost, is that we learn how to regulate our own emotions. We have learned today that the greatest part of educating our children is educating ourselves. It used to be you educate your kids. No. You educate yourselves. Do we, mothers and fathers, know how to regulate our own emotions? When I can regulate my emotions, I can co-regulate your emotions. I can be present for you. I can really be attached for you. So when we deal with our own anxiety, when we really work through our own anxiety, which is hard, it's easy for me to help my kid with his anxiety. It's his anxiety. Tatale, what's bothering you? You, Tati. He won't say that, but I'm supposed to know it, right? I said the other night before Pesach, I said yachatz, right? We break our matzah and we take the big piece and we hide it for the afikomen. And who finds the afikomen? The children, right? It used to be the rich kids got a calculator or a Parker pen. The poor kids got a Danish. Today it's like a private jet or a private jet or a Lamborghini or at least a tablet for the afikomen. But the bottom line is, if not, they'll call child services on you. But the bottom line is the kids reveal the afikomen. So I said the other day, what we hide, our children are going to reveal. The matzah we put away and we hide under the couch and we do it very well, they're going to bring it out to the open. So our children trigger a lot of our anxiety. And I think first and foremost, we really have to learn how to regulate our own emotions, how to really be anchored in a space of serenity, of dealing with our anxiety, of our stress, especially when our children trigger us. Because then we can be here for them, help them regulate their emotions, and it's a game changer for life. I had an interesting experience yesterday in my home. My child missed school on Sunday, one of my children. And then on Monday, one of his garments was wet and he couldn't find another garment, so again, he refused to go to school. And my wife told me, at another time I would have been so frustrated, like, you're going to miss school a second day because, we'll find you, whatever, we'll work it out, don't make a big deal out of everything. And then she says, but I decided that the most important thing in our times is attachment, that my child should feel safe, secure, seen, and soothed. Of course, I want him to go to school. I want him to learn well. I want him to be successful. But the most important thing you want is he should feel safe, secure, seen, and soothed. And I felt, my wife told me, that just by listening to him and embracing him, even though there was a loss because he lost another day of school, ultimately the pros were greater than the cons. And I found that to be very, very powerful. Because, we often get lost in the stress of the moment. You have to go to school. You have a test tomorrow. We have to be here. We have to be there. And it's understandable. And that's how we grew up, You miss a day of school. I had a teacher who was a pedagogical genius. And he would tell us the only excuse I would accept for you not coming to school is if you're attending your own funeral. Isn't that an amazing thing to tell 7th graders, right? This is where our self-confidence came from. But okay, we're not, we know better, but very often we get lost in the moment, and it's really our own anxiety. Now, I'm not telling you to take your kids out of school and have them stay home for the rest of the year. Some situations, maybe yes, not all. But my point is, when we can respond from a place of much deeper serenity and trust and connection and attachment, I think it transforms the inner psyche of our children.
That's a very beautiful answer. Okay, I'm going to finish.
I'm going to finish off with a question. Okay, we'll
There's another woman who wants
Okay,
this.
yeah, go for it.
The first one is not so important.
Hold on, the mic is. If you want to sing, until the thing. Oh, now it's on. Okay, you got lucky.
I did a song before, no?
Yeah.
Oh, Abraham.
Maybe another.
My
eighth-day song.
shtetl kren.
We're good. You could ask the question.
Okay, the first one is like a silly question I still want to know about.
Hold on. Sorry.
I would like to know if Biden came into the room, would you make a bracha?
You want to know
President Biden, if he came
if
into the room.
Biden came into the room?
Yes, would you make a bracha?
I beschlaft nicht. That's a good question. It's an interesting question. If Biden came into the room, would I make a bracha? No, it's a very interesting question. Because somebody told me that he was in a room and he came into the room and nobody noticed that he came into the room. And I actually felt bad because, when president comes into the room, usually it's like everything stops, and for good reason, most powerful person in the free world. And this person, the rabbi, told me he was in the room, and he said, I also felt, like Mamish felt bad. He said nobody noticed. But I think if halachically that would be the proper thing to do, and especially that it would help the Jewish people and help protect the Jewish people, it's certainly a consideration. I would not just say no. The reason I'm, awkward a little bit about it is because I just don't get that presidential feel of malchus. By the way, the President Donald Trump asked me, what's the meaning of the blessing? He wanted to know what I said because it was in Hebrew. So I couldn't give a direct translation because it wouldn't do much for him. Because, brachas are very short and cryptic. She'nasa mikvayde lebasav adam. Like, he gives his glory to flesh and blood. Like, first of all, Donald Trump has to believe that he's made of flesh and blood. That's one thing. And there's other considerations. There's a beautiful Taz. The Taz says that for Jewish kings, you say shechalak mikvaydai, and for non-Jews, they say nasan mikvaydai. And he says nasan is he gives, and chalak is it's a part, because the Jewish king reflects Hashem's malchus. So I tried to explain the blessing, that the idea is that when somebody is appointed to a position of leadership, it's a gift of God. It's not something you own, it's a divine gift. In other words, it's a privilege to heal the world, to bring goodness into the world. You're an ambassador of God. That's how I explained to him the blessing, which of course was very, very flattering for Donald Trump. So again, I would consult great halachic authorities, the pros and the cons, and then make a decision based on what I feel is, the right thing.
That's a great answer.
That would be my answer. But I wasn't asked to meet him, so I wasn't asked to introduce him.
I think she has one more question.
Go ahead.
The question I wanted to ask was something that's been bothering me, and everybody thinks I'm not normal. I think I'm very normal.
Okay.
I root one for me. I think years ago, fathers went to work. They came home, they learned in the morning, they learned in the evening, they learned in the afternoon. Women stayed home, took care of their children. Today, every woman has to go to college. It's a prerequisite to get married. What are you taking? What courses are you taking? Are you good for my son to go to stay in yeshiva for 4 years, 5 years in kollel? I don't think it's a good idea for children to be brought up by other people. I think it should be like years ago, where the fathers went to work, the mothers stayed home, and there's plenty of time to learn. And this has been bothering me for a long time. Everybody thinks that I'm wrong.
They think you're not, you said they think you're not normal. Did I hear right?
I think that's what she said.
Okay, I wouldn't use that word, obviously, but the point is, I don't think there's an argument that it's an incredible gift and opportunity when a mother is there to welcome her children off the bus and can be there with children as much as possible, and a father as well. And I think each couple in today's world has to figure out the best way that they can be there for their children, because I think what we know today is that attachment with our children is the most important priority in life. There's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of depression, a lot of overdose, a lot of suicide. I hate, to use these words, but it's a fact. There's a lot of things, dangers, porn addiction, and so many difficult challenges that teens and youth go through today because of so many different factors, internally and externally. Internal anxiety and external circumstances. And the greatest antidote to all of this is, we don't have the answer to every problem, but the greatest antidote to all of this is a deep, deep relationship between parents and children. And the deeper the relationship, the more the immunity, the more protection. As I said, the antithesis of addiction is not sobriety. The antithesis of addiction is connection, attachment. Attachment disorder becomes a great cause for a lot of alienation and a lot of trauma. So therefore, it's so important for every father and mother, in whatever field you are, whatever financial position you are, to try to work out to the best of your ability, obviously, to create a situation where their children can experience the most attachment with their primary caregivers, who are the parents. And let's understand it. I could send my child to the best therapist in the world, to the best teacher in the world, and it's amazing. But what Tati and Mommy can do for a child, nobody in the world can do for a child. So do not neglect that opportunity, and whatever you can do to enhance that, you should certainly do. And I think there's no greater priority than that, than really being there for our children. They are our tomorrow, and they need our soul, they need our presence, they need our heart, they need our attachment. The Jewish people, we're there for everybody. And some of us are very involved with the community and involved with other people, which is amazing. But we cannot neglect our own children. It's just that they have to come first. So, whatever that means in each family, I think take it seriously and do really what you can and even more than you can to secure that attachment.
That's really beautiful.
It's for mothers and fathers as well. Mothers and fathers. And of course, learning Torah is the oxygen of a Jewish home. Davening is the oxygen of a Jewish home. Yiras Shamayim and Avos Shamayim is the oxygen of a Jewish home. But for all of that to be inculcated in our children, they need that attachment. And if a father is just leaving the home constantly to go learn, it's an incredible thing to go learn, and everybody should go learn and have shir and kviyasit and l'Torah. But what you want, that the Torah should be a Torah that lifts up the home and infuses the home. Torah shouldn't be escape from home. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Avodas Yom Kippurim that at the end of Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol would put on his regular clothes, v'yoytze lebeisai, and he would go home. And the Mefarshim say, why is that part of halacha? Obviously, he would go home. Where should he go? To the bowling alley? Where should the Kohen Gadol go after Yom Kippur? He should go to the pizza shop? He went home. The Rambam puts like a halacha, v'yoytze lebeisai. And what if he didn't want to go home? What if he wanted to hang out in the Beis HaMikdash for the night? What if he wanted to go to his sister's house? What if he wanted to go to a Fabrengen? I don't know. So I once heard from the Lubavitcher Rebbe a beautiful vart that the Rambam was actually telling you a halacha. He said, the Kohen Gadol was in the Holy of Holies. He was in the holiest place in the world. The end of Yom Kippur, there's a halacha. Now you got to go home. It's not easy to go home. The Kohen Gadol comes home and his wife says, can you take out the garbage? The baby has been crying all day. Where were you? Oh, in Kodesh HaKadoshim. Was that my problem? The baby is crying. And remember, I know you fasted, but please clean up after yourself. I'm going to bed. And the Kohen Gadol thinks to himself, I was in Kodesh HaKadoshim. I caused the atonement for Klais, and then I go home, and this is what happens. I'm not coming home. So Rebbe said, v'yoytze lebeisai. How do you know Yom Kippur was Yom Kippur? If you go home. How do you know you were in Kodesh HaKadoshim? If you take it home. Because that may be the most powerful halacha about Yom Kippur. That after all the great highs, v'yoytze lebeisai, you have to go back home. You have to bring it all back to the house.
I'm going to finish off this episode with...
You're actually going to finish?
Yeah. It's.
You mean I can go home?
I'm trying to stall for time for you. I'm going to finish off with this question that you speak a lot in a lot of places, literally around the world, in the Pentagon, in front of Trump, everywhere, and you say a lot of stories. What's... Oh, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's one story that changed your life?
I've experienced many, many meaningful moments, and I've heard many very profound and powerful stories. I'll just tell you something that opened me up to a dimension that I haven't thought of earlier. I was once invited to do a Shabbaton a year ahead of time, which is not the Jewish way of doing things. You know, when the Pentagon invited me, they invited me 2 years before. And then I knew they weren't Jewish. You know, Jews invite usually, you know, right before. Somebody called me in California and he said, can you come tomorrow night to speak? I said, no, I'm booked. He says, but I already put up signs that you're coming. You know, that's great. So now it's my fault, you know. In any case, people are interesting. Mi chamcha Yisrael, right? He had so much bitachon. I said, bitachon in Hashem, not bitachon that I'm coming to California tomorrow. Anyway, so I got this invitation and I scheduled a Shabbaton, and I even got my wife to come with me. We sent our children to my in-laws, and my wife would come with me. We were really looking forward. We were about to leave the house. We packed up, and Friday afternoon, as I'm about to leave, I get a call from the organizer who tells me that the Shabbaton was canceled. Like Friday afternoon was canceled. You had hundreds of people coming. Politics. Like, politics? You found out about the politics 6 hours before the Shabbaton? You didn't know about the politics a year ago? Politics, it's ugly, it's disgusting. I'm like, how do you do this to all the people coming? How do you do this to me? I mean, it's just not menschlich. This person tells me, I'm embarrassed to be part of this organization, but it's canceled. I was really, really upset. Or to confess, I was furious. I was really furious for a few reasons. You know, we planned this and it was all worked out. I was also relying on the weekend financially, whatever. It was just a mess. I was so upset. I tell my wife, I say, Esty, this is really not nice. But it is what it is. It's canceled. So I wasn't going to have her or me cook Shabbos. It was already, Shabbos was soon. I invited myself out to a friend for the meal. And we went for the meal to this person, and we came home to our apartment. We were living in Brooklyn at the time on New York Avenue. But I have to tell you, I was really angry. Anyway, we come home, my wife goes to sleep, I go to the couch, I'm reading, I'm learning, and I thought I'll fall asleep, but I was not falling asleep. I was very anxious. So first I thought I was just anxious because I was upset. And I finally fell asleep on the couch, and 3 in the morning I woke up and my heart was pounding, and I didn't know why. I thought maybe something happened. I ran to our bedroom, my wife was sleeping, she was fine. Something was bothering me, I didn't know what. And I couldn't go back to sleep. This was in an apartment building. It's called the President Plaza. And I had an office on the 4th floor. We were living on the 1st. And there was light in the office, and I had more books there. And I wanted to check something up. So I thought, I can't fall asleep anyway. It's 3 in the morning. I'll go up to the 4th floor. So I start walking up the steps Friday night, 3 in the morning. And when I come up to the floor where my office was, I see a teenager sitting on the steps. And it was a very strange phenomenon. He was sitting like with his head on his forehead, just sitting on the steps and contemplating. It wasn't something I expected. So I sat down near him and I said, Good Shabbos. And he wouldn't answer. I said, Good Shabbos. Is everything all right? Do you need anything? Do you have a place to sleep? Can I do something for you? What's bothering you? No answer. After a few minutes, he says, Leave me alone. I'm like, what happened? Share with me. I'm not your enemy. What's your name? Do you need a place? He stands up, and obviously he was using somebody's apartment there because the door was open, and he ran into that apartment. And you know, just my instinct told me, follow him. And I followed him, and he slammed the door, but I put my foot in. So he slammed the door on my foot, but I got into the apartment. And as I walked in, he ran into the kitchen, and I saw his hand was filled with tablets, and he put them in his mouth. And I knew what those tablets were. I saw the bottle, and I knocked him. I shoved his hand, and most of them fell down and came out of his mouth, and he started to wrestle me. He's like, Get out of my life. I'm trying to end my misery. What are you doing? Get out of here. And we literally started a wrestling match Friday night, 3:30 in the morning. It was surreal. He was punching me and kicking me and fighting me, and I'm fighting back. Thank God I was a little bigger and a little stronger, so I managed to triumph, to be victorious, and I pinned him down. And after an hour, he relaxed, and I'm like, what's happening? He says, the pain was just too much. I decided to end everything. And you ruined my plans. You ruined my plans. We spoke till 7 in the morning. Till 7 in the morning. He opened up. He shared his life story. At 7 in the morning, he was different. He was a different person. He was really highly intelligent and sensitive, brilliant person, and very deep, deep, deep. We spoke for hours. Anyway, it was 7 o'clock, and I was giving a shiur at 8 before davening. So I brought him down to my apartment, and I woke up my wife, and I said, Esty, listen, I have a wonderful guest here. I'm going to give my shiur. I'm going to daven with the early fast minyan. I'll be home right away. I just need you to be with him for a few hours, and then I'll take over. And I went to shul. I did my shiur. I cut it. I davened with early minyan pretty fast, and I came home right away. And I spent Shabbos with him. Motzei Shabbos, he fell asleep. Motzei Shabbos, I set him up with somebody who I knew was a real expert for this type of trauma, and he really took him under his wings. And today he's, an extraordinary, young, bright, successful person, really a source of light and honesty and authenticity. And I remember Motzei Shabbos, thank you, Motzei Shabbos, I turned to my wife and I said, Esty, do you realize if that Shabbaton wasn't canceled, he would have been dead? And then I became aware of something. They canceled the Shabbaton because of politics. But God canceled the Shabbaton so that this boy should be saved. And from that moment in my life, it taught me such a profound lesson. Things happen. Not always by my choice. You get involved in things happen, and sometimes there's politics, and sometimes it's not so nice, and sometimes it's a little filthy, and it's so easy to get entangled and to get upset and to keep grudges and to get frustrated. From that story, I learned so much, that there is always another layer, there's another dimension that we never ever know. And I'm thankful today, I look back and I'm thankful that they canceled the Shabbaton, even though it was not pretty, because this boy's life was saved, and I had the privilege of being Hashem's shliach at 3:30 in the morning to literally save his life. For me, it really opened my eyes to always know that there is a deeper layer, and you have to be open to that.
Rabbi YY, I understand why people call you Rabbi Wow Wow. Thank you very much for coming out here.
Thank you. Thank you, Yaakov.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Okay. You're great.
Thank you. You were also great.
That is more you. So can you just take a picture of us? That was an incredible time. I really, really enjoyed it. And I want to tell everyone to, again, go check out Cedar Media Studios and Machshavas Yecheskel. They're incredible. In the links below, you could check them out. They'll take care of you, both of them. Whether you're looking for marketing, Cedar Media is their podcast, music, you want to do karaoke, they're there. And if you want good insights and depths into Torah, you can check out Machshavas Yecheskel. He also has the Daf Yomi share, which is incredible, which I did a Daf Yomi share video, and I saw his thing after. I'm like, I should have included it. Next one, part 2. So it's after the show, everyone left already, and I'm just there with Rabbi YY Jacobson, and we're just schmoozing about life. And it's so interesting. Like I had this conversation with him. He was so on when we were talking, and he was in the moment and animated, and then after, I'm having this like heartwarming, down-to-earth conversation with him. Like, he's very relaxed, and it's very interesting to see that, a lot of times you meet these grand speakers and they're incredible, but I love that those, I guess, private moments I had with him after, to see like he's such a relatable, great person. Yeah, he could be this powerhouse of inspiration, but it's also nice to see, talking about him, about his family, driving, talking to his driver, making jokes. And something was interesting to me. His driver, the person who drove him there, I don't know if he drives him all the time, but he's driven with him a few times. Nice Hasidish fellow. He's like, I know the world knows him as a great speaker, an incredible speaker, and as good as he is of a speaker, he's even better as a human being. And I'm like, whoa. Yeah, this the night was incredible for me. I'll never forget it. I don't know. It was the first of many. And if you enjoy the show, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a good old thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment on YouTube. Tell me your favorite part, your favorite moment, maybe suggestions. I don't know. But either way, until next time, keep on living inspired. Living l'chaim.